Hello, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending where you're at. Welcome. We have an amazing webinar set up for us today. If you wouldn't mind, in the little chat box, first off, make sure that you have it set to not just panelists, but panelists and attendees. Tell us where you are coming from. Drop your LinkedIn link in there so we can connect with each other. And we'll kind of get started here. I am coming from Fort Worth, Texas, which is beautifully chilly right now. I've got 3 huskies, and so they're thriving and living their best life in the cold weather. But we've got a jam-packed session for us today. Let us know who you are. Hey, Russ, coming in from Santa Barbara. It is beautiful in Santa Barbara. I love it. Christy coming in from Denver. Welcome. Denver is one of my favorite places. If I could move anywhere, it would be Denver. I absolutely love it. Let's see. Flora. Oh my gosh. I'm not even going to say that right in Brazil. Does anyone know how to say that? Florianopolis. I hope I said that okay. That is really fun. What about our lovely panelists? Morgan F., you want to share a little bit about yourself and where you're coming from?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan. I'm actually in Seattle, Washington. So I was just looking out the window. It's pretty gray here. It's been raining for the last 2 months straight, and that'll probably be the same for the next few. But yeah, I work at Highspot. I'm really excited to be here today and chat with you guys.
Awesome. And what about you, Morgan M.?
Yeah, hi, I'm Morgan as well. Nice to kind of meet all of you. Excited to be here too. I am an enablement specialist at Sprout Social, and I am located in Chicago, Illinois.
We're so excited to have you. And Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're coming from.
Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Phillips. I work at SHI. I'm also an enablement specialist as well. I'm in Austin, Texas, so not as cold as most places, but cold for us.
Yes, I love me some good old Conga Street down in Austin. If you've never been, y'all have to go. I'm going to throw up a poll as we're still waiting for some attendees to get here. I know we've got a lot of people registered, and end of month, end of quarter, we're getting through a lot of things in our sales org. So got 2 questions for y'all. Tell us, who are you? What role title best describes you? And are you in sales enablement right now? Are you wanting to get in sales enablement? Helps us get a better idea of who y'all are and what you're trying to get out of today. So whenever we talk, we can go through that. So I'm going to give it a few minutes. Love seeing all these managers. Oh my gosh, this is exciting. And look at all these current sales enablement people. That's great. It's so fun seeing some people from past webinars. So I'm really excited to have everyone on here. Let's see, I'll give it a few more minutes and then we'll get started. Okay. Wow, so we have a good amount of attendees that are currently in sales enablement. So I'm excited to see the questions that they're going to be throwing at y'all. And there's a lot of people as well that are interested in getting into sales enablement. Hey, Bruno, welcome. Once again, make sure that you have your chat box set to panelists and attendees so you can make sure that everyone gets to see what you're saying and where you're coming from. Yes, the Morgans of enablement. That's funny. Okay, so we can kind of get started in here. I don't know about y'all. I'm really excited about what we have going on for everyone today. Hey, Bill coming from Dallas. We have a huge amount of managers in our pool today of discussion. So I'm excited. We've got a lot of people currently in sales enablement. So hopefully that'll help us kind of tailor our discussion today. So we'll just get started. Hey, everyone. My name is Katie Ray. I'm the community engagement manager over here at Sales Hacker. We're so excited to have you a part of this discussion today. Just a few things to remember in case you saw this on your calendar and are trying to remember what you signed up for. I understand that. That is a story of my college career, was signing up for clubs, getting a t-shirt and not really showing up again. But in case you are trying to remember why you're here, we are talking all things sales enablement methods that you need in our current weird remote, half remote sales reality to be successful. We're going to be going over common trends. What are we seeing for remote onboarding? How do we plan for 2021 for success, right? We all are trying to get back into it, start another year strong, and really hit the ground running with our teams. Look at some different strategies for remote learning, what's worked well, what hasn't worked well. And then also talk about what do we do after onboarding? How are we making sure that our reps and our managers are fully equipped with the information that they need to be successful? So before we get started and jump into this, I want to make sure that you all know this is supposed to be super interactive. If you have any questions whatsoever that pertain to what we're discussing about, throw it in the Q&A box at the bottom bar. So you'll see, like your chat box and your Q&A box, drop it in there for any questions. We'll be going and answering them like during the conversation. So don't hesitate to throw it in there. And we'll get started. So I know our lovely panelists, Morgan F., Morgan M., and Samantha from SHI, Highspot, and Sprout Social are all here, and they just introduced themselves a little bit ago. But I think we should just jump into this, ladies. What do you guys think? Are we good for that?
Totally.
Perfect. So I want to know, and when this is kind of our first question that we're going to jump into is, what are we seeing right now for remote onboarding? How has your onboarding changed? What are some best practices? What can y'all share? So I'll let y'all take the floor.
I can go first. I actually, on our team, am the one that's working with onboarding on a constant basis. So my world consists of onboarding pretty heavily. Our onboarding program is 3 to 4 weeks. And I think when we went remote, the biggest thing for me to ensure that our new hires were feeling engaged. So I would say trying to make an onboarding program that's as heavily engaging as you can, with video and breakout rooms and discussions throughout. As I'm sure we've all been through trainings where it's death by PowerPoint. We can't do that in a Zoom world, and it's not going anywhere. So making sure that you're engaging not only the new hires, but making sure your managers are engaged, your peer coaches are engaged, that it's really a team effort, because they're not feeling that inclusivity that you get as in an office. So that would be my number one way that I've tried to shift it into Zoom.
So let's dig a little bit deeper on this. How do we engage our reps? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. For me, it's making sure that even at the beginning of a training session, there's small chat. So getting them talking right away as soon as a training starts is so important, because it sets the tone for the rest of the meeting. They're more open, they're off mute, making sure that they're all off mute for the entire training. I've seen really success with, because they're more collaborative. Also, just making sure that I'm having breakout groups, because we are in Zoom, our retention is a lot shorter than in person. So if I'm teaching a concept, I want to make sure I have a breakout or a discussion or some kind of active learning right in that moment before moving to my next subject. That way the retention is just higher, which are just a couple examples.
That's good. I really like the idea of getting them talking. As every one of us, our whole reality has changed in how we hold meetings. And so having that initial discussion, and if you think about, your first time in your first job and you're going through sales onboarding and it's awkward and you're in your first meeting and you're like, I just graduated, I'm trying to get my life together. My parents say I need a job. What is this? So I love that you're really focusing in on how do we make this as engaging and make it a really like collaborative discussion in total. I love that. What else? What other things are we seeing?
I'll also jump in. So similar to Morgan, I run our account development onboarding program. So live and breathe onboarding every single month. So one thing that I've really noticed, I would definitely echo, is that like culture and morale are more important than ever. And we've made like a huge, I would say, push and made that a huge priority since going virtual. And one thing that, we've seen a lot of success with is leaning on mentorship and making that a big priority. So an example of that is each of our account development reps, when they join the company, get a mentor for their first month of onboarding. We run a month-long onboarding program. And one thing that we've seen work is just similar to what Morgan mentioned, just we take breaks throughout the day and do mini like conversation check-ins. So we call them like bring your own coffee, as if, we were in the office and going to get a coffee break.
Yeah.
We'll incorporate the mentors in these like, coffee breaks, or, sometimes they're, I think they're an icebreaker, but they're like icebreakers where they get to know other people within their team and within the company. So another thing that's worked is this bring your own coffees. We'll have a 30-minute, check-in where we don't talk about work. We just get to know each other and get them incorporated into the team that they'll be joining, as well as other people within the org. And we actually incorporate some plus ones as well. So mentors will bring a +1 so that, the new hires are getting to know as many people as possible within their first month. And what we've noticed is like a huge, I would say, more success in terms of them feeling, incorporated, inclusive, and like a part of the company, even though they haven't met anybody in real life yet. So that's something that like culture and morale is really important, and more so than ever than if we were in the office.
Yeah, I want to touch on, some of these strategies around building culture a little bit better. I love the idea of these breaks and these little, coffee get-togethers. I'm a huge advocate for mentorship. I would love to see our attendees. If you want to throw this in your chat, how many of you have a mentorship program at your company? How many of you have mentors? If you want to raise a hand, or if you want to throw yes in there, I'd be curious, because I think it's an easy way to get that buy-in initially from these reps, right? It's making them feel important. They feel special. And that's awesome. There's a lot of you that are throwing your hands up. Thank you. And we got a question from Kelly. Are the mentors that you're talking about, are they like trained mentors? Are they peer mentors? Are they, senior reps? What is that relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the mentorship, the mentors that we pair are actually peers. So they are in either the same role, or they are seniors within the role. And they have to fill out like an application, and then are nominated by their manager as well. So they're usually reps that, are top performers, but also we strategically pair them based on personality, learning style. We want to make sure that each rep has like the best experience for them. And everybody's different. So we try to pair it based on that.
And I guess just to take it a little step further, so many companies do these like personality quizzes. How do you figure out who to pair them with, and how do you figure that out? How do you decide who goes with who?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously we as enablement people spend a lot of time with these new hires, as I'm sure you guys are also training them every single day. So we don't pair until the end of the first week of our onboarding program. So we give it a little bit of time for myself to get to know the new reps. And then obviously, I know our, reps that have been onboarded for a while pretty well. We have them each fill out like an application, as well as the new hire fill out what they're looking for out of a mentor, what their strengths are, what they're most excited or nervous about joining the company and the role. So we find that there ends up being some pretty good matches using that strategy.
Awesome. That's great. Sam, what do you have what would you share that is something that's worked really well in this transition for y'all at SHI?
Yeah, I mean, while in office, I was a really big person of whiteboarding. Definitely, it's a lot harder to do virtually now. So I've come up with some more creative ways. As people on my team know, I love games. So besides just using games for cold opens, I also like to do a lot of trivia style, Jeopardy style games for like bite-sized learning too. It's been really beneficial because, these people have never seen each other in person. You can't walk up to them like down the row or go to next to them next door in their seat or while they're eating lunch. So it really helps them get like a more interactive, and they're more willing to be part of that culture when we have, like corporate, happy hours, or they want to join somebody else's team happy hour or a partner. So it's been really helpful.
I have really become a big fan of our work happy hour thing that's happened since 2020. I think that might be one of my favorite things to come out of 2020 is work happy hours. I love it. Uh, I think it's just a blast. And you really get to know who these people are without a lot of stress. It's definitely not, I don't think, like an exact replacement for that in-person connection. I don't think anything that we do on Zoom or through video messaging, I don't think anything like that will ever replace, the value um, of in person. But I definitely think that they are amazing as substitutes. Now, we do have another question here. For the sales enablement, is there a prerequisite to have an experience? Okay. Now I see what you're asking. Okay, so to kind of get into sales enablement, and this is a little bit of a segue here. Would you guys mind sharing what brought you into sales enablement? I know we're going to kind of jump around a little bit, but do you feel that some of the best sales enablement managers are ones that have sales experience themselves, or what would you recommend for somebody who's trying to get into sales enablement?
I'll go ahead and go.
Perfect.
So I was a seller beforehand at my own company, as well as beforehand I was selling wine. So that selling experience was super beneficial to get in seller enablement because it really helps you understand like who is your audience because you've been the audience before. So I definitely find that very helpful. But also, I started small on my team was when I got interested in enablement. I started speaking to, people in my company, what their roles were, just to get an idea if that was the route I wanted to go. And I started taking more leadership on my sales team. So I started creating, email templates, leading small sessions during our team meetings, just stuff to really help boost my confidence and make sure this was the right place I wanted to go.
Interesting. Really good feedback.
I actually have an education background. So I was in the classroom for a little bit and then ended up doing a shift and went into sales from there. Before I started at Sprout, was in a company that I found out about the sales enablement role, and it felt like I was marrying the two together as far as an education background with teaching and then my sales experience. So I do have the sales background as well. I think it's helpful because you are teaching and training a lot of sales positions, but I don't see it as the end all be all for getting into sales enablement. Because I'm a little proof of that with having a different background.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would also just agree. I have a sales background as well at another company as well as at my own company. And I definitely think it helps. I wouldn't say it's a requirement. A few people on my enablement team have educational backgrounds similar to you, Morgan. And then I also know some enablement people that have product marketing backgrounds. So obviously, we kind of sit between many different functions, but I do find that it's really helpful, at least for me personally, having that sales background, being able to speak the same language and understand, what the challenges are of the reps that I'm then training. But I think you can also gather that from, asking the right questions, asking questions to your sales reps if you are interested in getting into enablement and you were not a rep, just truly understanding them and what, how we can help them. I think that's most important.
It's really interesting hearing all of you kind of share your experience with this and seeing in our comments too of who's here and what their experience is as well. I think it's awesome. I think anyone that's a teacher is absolutely amazing, whether it be teaching sales or teaching in the classroom. I spent 1 year as a 7th grade English teacher. The Lord did not bless me with enough patience. Not enough patience. And so sales worked out really well for me. But I think just like anything, right? It's all about really wanting to be a consistent learner and understanding. And ironically, it's very similar to sales in and of itself, is making sure you're asking the right questions, learning, being open to a discussion to figure out how to do things better. I think that's really great. We're going to kind of keep moving along in the interest of time. so we really spent a lot of time talking about, as we're doing this remote onboarding process, we're learning about culture. We're learning how do we push this culture that we usually do a good job with in person. How do we push this remotely? How do we make sure that morale is still high? How do we make sure that our reps are still extremely bought in to our company and to what, to what we're trying to accomplish here? And I think a great way to kind of understand a little bit more about this is, how do we measure what the success of our onboarding program looks like? So I'd love to hear from all of you on, one, how do we know our onboarding program is successful? How do we measure it? And I guess, what do we do if it's not successful? How do we make those changes that need to be done? So
yeah, I can jump in here. That's the magic question, Katie. I love that. I think a few things that we're thinking about, especially since going virtual, is, I would say we are measuring, different and more leading indicators than we were before. And I would say one way that we're actually doing that is we've created a competency map and a competency model of what all of our reps what level they should be at, and everything that they should know basically by the end of month one. And the way that we measure that and break it down is by knowledge, skills, and process. So we've built our onboarding program around that, so that it is very actionable and easy. Well, I wouldn't say easy, but we're able to measure different aspects of it. And so I would say, thinking through that's been a shift since going virtual, as we've kind of revamped this competency model and being able to align every single training that we do throughout their first month to that. And I would say a few ways that we measure. I mean, obviously we're looking at all the normal metrics like time to quota and average time to hit quota consistently. I think this notion of rep consistency over time is like really important, especially while virtual. And I would say we were attempting to do that previously, but now that we are virtual and I don't have as much visibility into what their actions are every single day, this notion of being consistent, after month one is really important for us. So we're talking that, but then within the competencies, we track based on, lesson completion, and we actually track like how engaged are they in the, content that I'm having them read, or complete activities to complete during month one. And those we find are like leading indicators of success in the role. Yeah. So there's a few things that we're thinking about in terms of measuring.
I'm curious, whenever you talk about competency models and maps, has those competencies changed since this whole switch with COVID?
Yeah, it's a great question. For us, it hasn't changed. I would say there's different buckets that are more important than others. So, in this notion, we break it down, like I said, with knowledge, skills, and process. Then we've identified within all of those, what are the most important that we absolutely need to, basically be successful in the rep being able to accomplish. So we've kind of identified those, and we've doubled down on those and figured out how can we reinforce those concepts. So one example of that is we have like reinforcement courses that we'll have them do after maybe we do a live session, we might do a workshop, then we'll actually have them complete a course where they is like reinforce and show that they actually can like demonstrate that they can do it. So I wouldn't say they've changed, but we definitely doubled down on like more important ones that weren't the case when we were in person.
Yeah.
Such as workflow.
More of a shift on what's important, what's priority. Gotcha.
Definitely.
Morgan M., what do you think?
Yeah. We have, so throughout onboarding, there's a survey that happens at the end of each week to get new hires feedback. So we understand, how are you feeling this week? Where's your confidence at with each competency that we want them to reach for? And that way I can see over the 4 weeks that they're going through onboarding, if that is hopefully trending upwards, or where is it dipping and why is it dipping in this certain area? And I can circle back to that and understand, okay, if it's on product, what's going on with our product training, what needs to be revamped or changed, or reworked, or if it's on a discovery call, I can go back and revisit those. So gaining the new hires feedback is pretty heavily something that I constantly am doing. But I also recently, actually, since we went remote, am gaining manager feedback as well. Not necessarily right after onboarding, because right after onboarding, they're still in the trenches figuring what's what. But at their like 7 or 8 week mark, I'm reaching out to the managers to understand, what did you expect them to have learned during onboarding and that they didn't know while they're while they're on their own, that first couple weeks. So they're relying more on the manager for questions and no longer coming to enablement. So I can get a better sense of where are the gaps in the onboarding program that we can cover.
Interesting. That's so good. I think that consistent feedback is probably so important. All of you managers that are on here, if your sales enablement reps are not doing that, you should definitely ask them to do that. And if you are a sales enablement manager on here, you need to be making sure you're getting that constant feedback. Just like in anything that we do, it's the feedback that is so important. We do have some really good questions that I'm sure all of you can respond to. One of them is, as we're looking at measuring success, what are some systems or software that y'all would recommend to help measure and track like lesson completions, help with metrics, and measuring like responsiveness and engagement with it? Anyone can take this.
I'm happy to hop in. So when I was talking about, obviously we use a lot of different tools and softwares, as I'm sure all your reps use as well. We actually utilize, when I was talking about lessons, we actually utilize our own platform, not trying to plug that, but we do truly use it. So we have lessons that we have reps complete within courses in Highspot. So that's how we're tracking it within our platform. But then also in terms of obviously like quota attainment and average time to hitting quota, we obviously utilize Salesforce very heavily and different dashboards and reporting in there. But yeah, we mostly are, I'm looking at, obviously I personally care about, lesson completion, course completion, and how engaged they are in reading the content. And we're using Highspot for that. But we also, another tool that I absolutely love, we utilize Gong for call recordings. So they'll listen to discovery calls, but then they'll listen to, watch demonstrations that, so they can learn more about the product and how to go about the different sales calls. So I would say that those are the 3 main ones.
Perfect. With Highspot being the top.
Obviously, I love it. I use it every day.
Ours are a little more homegrown. We do have an LMS that we use, and I can pull reports to then share with managers to let them know, maybe on our outreach training, they missed a couple questions, so we may want to revisit that again.
Yeah.
But as far as pooling like ramp time, that's all Salesforce, like other Morgan said. And I do have a kind of one of the analysts on our team made it, a Excel spreadsheet that shows our grades for each new hire. So each new hire goes through certifications throughout the process and they score themselves, but then enablement also gives feedback there too. And peer coaches fill out a form within that too. So they kind of get a snapshot where at the end of onboarding, hey, this is where your new hire is. This is where I would suggest continuous education to make sure that it's not just stopping at onboarding. Like we all know, it's got to be continued on. And that's what's been helpful for me.
Interesting. Sam, I'm really curious too, coming from SHI, I know that y'all have a really great, like right out of college program. So I'd be curious too on like what that looks good and what kind of separates it from other resellers, like post-grad programs.
Yeah, I would say our onboarding process is a little bit longer. It is typically about 3 to 4 months comparatively to some. So it's really heavy, really technology based, having to go into a lot of different buckets, but it's kind of a mix between what both Morgan F and Morgan M said. We have tons of different platforms and LMSs that we use for scorecards and KPIs, but having the in-person interaction, getting like a manager feedback and the survey feedback is super important. So we do a long exam at the end of their 3 months. They have about 2 weeks to study for it, making sure they know everything from their checklists. And it lets us know like, hey, like this isn't stuff that you just memorize. Like, do you have the muscle memory actually to be able to go onto the floor and do this? And then we can find out what areas that you're going to need that mentorship and that progress to keep helping you forward.
Perfect. I love that. That's so interesting. And I've always been a big fan of like a middle mix of like a short to a long onboarding, because I think there's a lot of areas where like new reps especially always need help. My husband and I always have a saying where it's like, in sales, it's, you know, you have like 4 months to ask all the questions. And then after that, like, it's not cute anymore. you need to know what you're doing. And I mean, there's always going to be questions, and like, I don't want to ever discourage anyone from asking questions, but there's definitely questions that should have been asked early on that if you don't know it by, you know, you should have it figured out. But, I'm curious, and one of the questions we just got to is, what are y'all seeing as the average ramp time from onboarding to your first deal? And I'm curious, in taking it another step, of what has that time changed since the pandemic and since remote onboarding has really been a big focus? So
I don't have off the top of my head. I don't have exactly what we are, and it changes so much for each role. So like sales development is going to be different than an account executive, than a customer success.
Yeah.
I wish I had an answer for you there. I don't know if Morgan and Sam might have something else.
Yeah, I would say I'm similar in that case. You know, as I mentioned, I onboard account development reps, so it's a little bit different than account executives. They're not necessarily closing deals, but for a little bit more context, our average or our ramp onboarding time is 3 months. So I run our month 1 onboarding program, and one of my colleagues runs our month 2 and 3. And what I have noticed, and I can say has shifted a little bit since being virtual, is that month 2 and 3, it is obviously a heavy reinforcement, but there's also, you know, new concepts. And I would say it's a lot more hands-on than it was in person, because of that reinforcement. Like you mentioned, Katie, you know, there is no dumb question. However, you know, by the end of the 3 months, they've gotten a lot of support, and they have a lot of resources, including obviously their managers, their mentors, multiple enablement people. So at that point, at the end of the 3 months, we expect them to be fully ramped and able to hit their quota. So yeah, I would say that that's the context for us.
Perfect. In some of we've got some more questions coming in too, which I love. We've got another one kind of focused on our specific sales enablement programs and like understanding what key topics are we really focused on. So are we just with what y'all are doing, are we just focusing on onboarding, or continuing education, or lunch and learns? What does that look like for everyone?
I can go first. My team is kind of separated into its own specialty. So I work with onboarding, but I'm still heavily working with the rest of the team on that continuous ed side, because anything on continuous ed most likely needs to come into onboarding at some point, right? But for my team, we are separated into specialties. So we have someone who's covering skills development on the continuous ed side, as well as product and process. So we do have it pretty specific, but we all work together, and working, especially big projects, we're all going to lend a hand in whatever capacity we can help.
Gotcha. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say I work a lot on the continuous portion. A lot of the stuff that, you know, I work in onboarding also needs to make sure that it fits for what they're going to learn later on. So, you know, if I'm going to be teaching somebody about data center and networking, I have to make sure that I'm up to date on currently what customers are buying, what's going on in the industry as well too, and making sure to fix that in our onboarding and make sure that our people in continuous education know what their groundwork is and where I can help them.
That's good. That's really good feedback.
And yeah, our team is broken out similar to Morgan, but we're broken out by audience. So like I mentioned, we support, there's 3 of us that support account development representatives. So that team And yes, I primarily focus on onboarding. However, we also do, ongoing continuous learning, like you mentioned, Sam. We have weekly trainings on Thursdays, as well as a huge, I would say priority recently has been manager enablement as well. So I know that's obviously a lot more important, especially being virtual and leaning on, our managers to be able to, train and continuously support their reps and enabling them. So we focus on, manager enablement, ongoing training on Thursdays, as well as kind of like some drip training and like important announcements in team meetings on Tuesdays as well. So there is some continuous learning and I would say like bridging the gap between our marketing team and our sales team. That's kind of where we sit. Obviously with my focus being onboarding.
That's awesome. Let's see. I think we just got okay, cool. We've got a good question in here on what is different about an enablement manager than an account exec enable. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So what's different from enabling management versus enabling your reps?
Yeah, I can take this. This is a great question. I think we think about this strategically like all the time. And I think, within the past quarter, we've made this a bigger priority, I would say. But this notion of manager enablement, we believe that, managers are really an extension of the enablement team. So once, I'm done with a rep on, month one, like, yay, they're onboarded. Now they're on teams, right? Like our job isn't done and we can support our managers, in a number of different ways to ensure that consistency and scalability of their reps being confident. So one thing that like when we think of manager enablement, we actually think of like, we provide them with an onboarding resource kit. So what I mean by that is, at the end of their first month, they join teams and now they're on a manager team, right? So they're in the role, they're trying to hit quota, they're on teams. However, what we do to enable the managers is we provide them this resource kit. So I, throughout the first month, have taken notes on, what's the rep learning style, what's their strengths, their weaknesses, going back to that competency map, where is the rep in terms of their competencies and recommendations for coaching opportunities, beyond that first month. And maybe areas that they need reinforcement in. So it kind of makes that handoff really seamless between onboarding and being, officially in the role. So I think that's one area that like a resource kit you can provide your managers so that they can have easy, coaching opportunities for when the reps join their teams. But then also just, we have weekly meetings to ensure that what we're training on those Thursdays are really relevant and like top of mind for what the managers are needing. And I think, it's constantly changing what they're needing and what they're wanting, what we need to reinforce. So I think we have a good way, like two-way communication with the managers on figuring that out, so that we can train what's relevant on Thursdays.
Yeah. So, and I know many of you have actually mentioned whenever we're talking about like continuous education, and there's a lot of different platforms and different formats to do that. For myself, I am a huge Lunch and Learn fan. I think that's always fun. It's kind of different. But I also love like scheduled meetings. So not everyone appreciates that type of stuff like I do. But I think one of the coolest things to do whenever we're talking about continuous education and like as far as content goes, I'm a huge proponent for market research and understanding like what's happening in these industries and sharing that with our teams. Can y'all maybe speak to, is that a priority? Is that not? Do you want it to be more of a priority? And like where you think the value comes from doing something like that?
Yeah, that's a big priority for us. We actually have focused sometimes even like on a quarterly basis where we'll pick a persona or an industry where we're just going to focus on that enablement for that quarter. For onboarding as well, we are coaching or training on buyer, persona, and industry. So ensuring that our new hires can have that business acumen when they talk to those customers, because a lot of times today we're not able to build on those in-person relationships. So our sellers do need to understand what is this certain buyer care about, and how can I help that buyer based on those KPIs that they're looking at, or the problems that they need fixed.
Yeah.
And same with industry or etc.
Yeah, I love that. Sam, what about yourself?
Yeah, so every month where I work, we have a new initiative that they're trying to push towards or keep continuing on. Obviously, with end of year, we have a lot of things that we're all probably very similar with use it or lose it. So budgets. So we focus a lot on budgets and QBRs. And right now we're working on, making sure we have bite-sized content, having those weekly, workshops that they can come join us as well too, and sending out reasons to call. I know we send like reasons to call and tech savvy stuff to them. They're like, hey, this is what's going on in industry. This is what's going on in 2020 in December, which is a very unique December compared to most. So it helps to keep them on their toes, and so they don't have to go out and find all that research themselves.
Yeah. And you know what I was thinking about too, as you were talking about that, whenever you're talking about like the little bite-sized pieces, I think of like a good piece of advice for those of you who are on here who are wanting to get into sales enablement. If your company doesn't do this, start doing it and sending it to your manager and sending it out to your teams and just saying, hey, I saw this and I thought, this might help you. Or, hey, let's say I'm calling into education and for the E-rate program, they're starting to accept, bids or whatever, and all these schools in my area is getting more money. You may want to look into this, and here's like a little nugget that I wrote up if you wanted to use that as well and leverage that. That is what they're looking for, and that you're able to point back to that as well and say, look, here's the things I've done that has helped increase our revenue. And so, think about some of this stuff where you're like, oh man, I wish my sales enablement team is doing this. Do this and see what happens and see the success that you'll have. But then also make sure that it's geared with, I'm wanting to help my team. I'm wanting to help myself do better. But I love that. And I'm kind of curious, we have a question here from Jacob as we were talking about our onboarding and these competency models and maps. Are we focusing on kind of like a rubric? So here's the 5 areas that they need to master, and a 10's mastery, and 0 is you probably should try again or go to marketing or HR someplace else. Are we focusing on, what does that competency kind of look like? Is it rubric, or is it just a little more fluid?
We use a rubric for our certifications. So there's a rubric for a call, and there's also a rubric for a demo. So demoing the product. Mm-hmm. And in that rubric, they can understand what are we looking for, and it literally outlines pretty much all the training that they've been going through. So awesome. If it's pre-call planning, if it's the building rapport, they're understanding that we're looking for those throughout the certification, and it also gives them an idea of what mastery looks like too, right next to that. So they understand what exactly should I be concentrating on. And from there, we score them on I think it's a 0 to 3 to understand if they met that competency.
I don't know about anyone else. I'm not a fan of 0 to 3 because I'm always like, I literally was telling my boss this today, I was like, love that wildly average. Sitting at that nice 2 mark. That's always a good one. Wow, great feedback. I know we only have time for probably like 1 or 2 more points here. I know we've gone over so much from what has sales enablement kind of looked like this past year. How do we make sure that we're really keeping this tight-knit, collaborative culture when everyone's living across the country? I know so many reps have been like, we're going to Mexico and this is where we're staying for the next 6 months. It's really hard to create that, but it sounds like y'all have really come up with some very practical and tactical and almost easy to apply types of strategies, whether it comes from mentorship, peer mentors, your coffee hours and little social breaks, happy hours, fans of those. But as we're kind of wrapping all this up, I'd be curious to know, and I'd love for every single one of you to share maybe 3 points of effective onboarding. Just 3. I'll give you a minute to think about it, but whoever wants to jump in first, go for it. But I want to hear from all of you 3 things that makes your onboarding effective.
Okay, I can jump in first.
Perfect.
I think if I were to give advice, any advice from what I've learned in terms of like making onboarding effective, one is being able to mimic tribal knowledge as much as possible, especially virtual. So one way that we're doing that in our onboarding program is incorporating rep-led trainings. So utilizing top performers, whether it be like a rep-led panel on, Salesforce workflow. So ensuring that the reps are actually training, what they're doing in their day-to-day. I'm trying to mimic that tribal knowledge as if we were in the office and a rep was asking their neighbor, like, hey, I forgot how to log this activity. Can you help me? So we try to mimic that through like a rep-led panel or incorporating like top performers in, we've done a cold call training called like pick your own cold caller, where it's like kind of with different breakout rooms, and it's actually top performers with different cold call styles training the newer reps on, what's been working for them. So I would say mimicking tribal knowledge, those are just two small examples, because that way, when they are onboarded and they're at home, in their apartment, working by themselves, they actually have resources and understand what other top performers are doing. So I'd say that's one. Another one would be this notion of reinforcement. So we spent the whole last week of onboarding doing reinforcement training. So going over all the concepts over again and just, reinforcing what they learned throughout the first 3 weeks. So we all know, you end up, I think it's like the quote is 75% of training is forgotten if it's not applied within their first week, which as an enablement person, it makes me so sad. But I think this notion of reinforcement is something that we've prioritized really heavily so that they actually remember things when they get into the role. And I would say that has been a huge help in terms of like retention. So that was only two, but I want to give someone else a chance. I could think of a third later.
I love that. And I'm a huge fan of this rep-led training, because there's always been like this concept that if you can teach it, you actually know it. So I think that is absolutely amazing. And you can really understand where reps feel really strong and where they're really weak, and figure out how to best work with that too. What about you, Sam? What do you think?
Still from Morgan a little bit, same with like the rep-led trainings too. We have used a lot more case study and interviews with people, which has been super helpful. Especially just hopping on Zoom, like they actually get to see, have 30 people talk to them instead of having 30 separate people come up to them at their desk, and they get to hear it from the horse's mouth. So that's actually been something really helpful that I think will carry over to, once we are back at work in person too, or whenever our work environment changes too. Also, just culture, it's hard making everything super fun. And like I said earlier, I love games. So doing those knowledge checks with more games has been really fun, and just finding super cheesy things like Kahoot or Jeopardy style. And then just keeping everything more bite-sized. We did a lot more longer trainings in person comparatively to what we would do now. So condensing that down for them and finding out, like what is truly, do we need to double down on, what is important, and what's something that we, this is they can do in their own spare time if they want to, like on our platforms.
I love that. Great advice. Yeah, what they can do on their own spare time. That's good. Morgan, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think the culture is definitely top of mind for us, not just having sales trainings all day, every day, but bringing in other parts of the organization so they can meet new people, ways that they can work with different teams. So just giving them that broad perspective and more people to interact with is something that we look at. I also think the organization and flow of your onboarding is super important. And I try and mimic it to what their flow will be once they hit the phones. So when they are in their own day-to-day process, that's what they learned in onboarding. They can kind of copy and paste and be as successful as they can. And the last one is going to be back to the first question that we had, is just engaging. Like Sam said, making it fun. In today's world, we need to try and connect as much as we can through Zoom, and having that engagement and participation is just going to make for a happier new hire, happier employee, better ramp time, etc. It's a domino effect.
Awesome. Yeah, such great feedback. There's a lot of really great discussions that have come from this. You guys, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to just try and summarize all of this. So we have focused on the value of building culture and morale whenever we're onboarding remotely. We focused on different practical tactical strategies ranging from mentorship to rep-led trainings to make sure that your teams are really not only feeling like they're being built into, right? Because that's where we see a lot of retention is with those reps and managers who are feeling that they're being invested, but they're also having opportunities to kind of give back and invest back into their teams. We also talked about how are we best training our managers? What is the difference between manager training, rep training? We've talked about making sure that our onboarding is up to par and still being flexible with our competencies as what's been important in 2019 is not the same as what's important in 2020, and similarly will not be the same in 2021. So we've made a lot of big adjustments with what our sales enablement team is as well. Now, if you all are very interested in asking more questions, I'm sure Morgan F, Morgan M, and Samantha are more than welcome to answer anything. You're going to be getting a recording of this webinar within 24 hours. So check your email. If you want to add them on LinkedIn, I'm sure they're fine with that too. And ask all the great questions about sales enablement. But I think that's all we have for today. Thank you all so incredibly much. I know I've learned a lot. Into our attendees, we have another fabulous webinar coming up on Thursday, so look out for that invite. But thank you all so much, and thank you Highspot for sponsoring this webinar today. So I'll let everyone go. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Bye everyone.